Hello, my name is Evan, and we're going to be talking about, for the first time this year, a tropical system that is in the Gulf of Mexico that is trying to do something. And what we're going to try to be figuring out is, will this be the first tropical storm of 2024? I mean, the thing is that it's not going to be, if you're talking about the globe. But if you live in the United States, the area in which you are most concerned about is the Atlantic Ocean, the Caribbean, and the Gulf of Mexico. So we're going to be breaking down to see whether or not this next storm that is kind of pushing up in through Florida and going up the Atlantic coast will pose a threat for becoming a tropical storm or not. And I think that's going to be important to figure out. Is it going to have much impacts to land? We'll talk about that as well, and we'll break all of that down for you. And then also at the end of this forecast, we're going to be talking about some severe weather that's going to be possible for the northern plains going into the Great Lakes of the United States as well. So no matter where you are, stay tuned. Make sure you hit that like and subscribe button if you want to stay up to date with the severe weather and the tropics. And yeah, let's go ahead and get into it. Okay, first things first, this is this little storm that we're talking about that is going to be bringing quite the flood threat to Florida. You can see you got those reds and those kind of darker colors in this satellite imagery. This is a satellite in space looking down at the United States and mainly this part of Florida. And you can see right in here, there's our low pressure system. You can see it is streaming that moisture into Florida. And we're going to potentially have a pretty decent flood threat in and along this area here where we have been experiencing a drought, but now we're getting kind of an abundance of moisture kind of push into the area as well. So we've got to be watching out for that. We'll be talking about those exact numbers and what to expect. All right, first things first, we're going to be talking about the estimated precipitation and the future rainfall of this storm. Again, right back in here, there's that low pressure system. And as you can see today, going into the future, we're going to start to see some of these blobs of rain work into the area. And yeah, I mean, we're going to be watching out for that flood threat. So let's kind of push this forward as that low pressure system, which again is not going to be a tropical storm at this time, moves into Florida. You can see that it's going to kind of push off to the east, bring a lot of rain, and then continue to go up a little bit more to the north and east. And you can see out over the Atlantic, it tries to develop again, according to the GFS, into something a little bit more organized. But to be honest, this is still kind of a weak storm, probably not even a depression at this point. I mean, we do have some decent water temperatures, but they're closer to the coast. And so it's not really in the best, water temperature environment. We'll talk about that as well. But as you can see, it's moving up to the north here and east, and it kind of stays, relatively weak, maybe flirting with tropical depression as we get into like early Friday Friday afternoon. But I mean, really nothing, super organized as that pushes off to the east, and eventually it's going to transition more into a hybrid system as it gets closer to the north and east. Let's go check out the Euro as well and kind of talk about this. Same thing, low pressure systems back down in here, pushing this forward. You can see that this thing tries to organize, but the Euro has this being a lot weaker of a system, so not even getting close to a tropical depression status or even a tropical storm status as that pushes off over the ocean. But again, a lot of rain is going to be dumped on the initial stages. You can see, look at all that precipitation down there in Florida. I mean, just rain after rain after rain for about 2 to 3 days, maybe even longer, going into Thursday, and then Friday could still have some precipitation hanging around, and then going into Saturday, still some storms could be hanging around in Florida. So a lot of rain, a lot of cloud cover, somewhat miserable days coming for Florida. So some of the things that this storm would need if it were to try to organize a little bit better is a lot of moisture. That is one of the criteria. Also, what's the shear environment looking out there? And then what are the water temperatures looking at like out there? So looking at the GFS, you can see through the duration of this thing's life until it gets up a little bit further to the north, for the duration of this thing's life, it's going to be in a really nice moisture environment. I mean, there's plenty of moisture for this storm to tap into. But again, that's not the only thing. But you can see as it goes to the north and east, it starts to fling bring some drier air around it, and that's when the storm is becoming more of a hybrid system, subtropical system, as it interacts with more dry air. And if we go over to the Euro model, you can see that there are kind of in agreement here for this storm to have plenty of moisture early on, and then eventually transitioning into more of a hybrid system as you see that drier air start to really work back in here. And that low pressure system at this point is close to Canada, and really not impacting the United States at all. Another thing that we look for is going to be the shear. So we're looking at the bulk shear. This is from the surface all the way up into the 500 millibars. Typically, you want to have a little bit higher in the atmosphere than that, but this is a good rough estimate to allow us to look at what the shear environment is going to be for the storm. And at its initial stages, it's not really that favorable. You can see there's a lot of shear there around the Florida, so that's what's going to keep this thing from forming earlier on there in Florida. Maybe a little bit of a tornado threat as that comes through. Might have to watch out for small tornado threats for some of those storms initially, today or tomorrow going into the next day. And then as you can see, this thing is out over the ocean, really not doing too much to anybody, but there is a little bit of shear. That's mainly local shear that the storm is creating. So the shear environment really isn't that unfavorable for tropical development, and neither is the moisture. So why is this thing looking so weak? Why isn't it forming? Why isn't it turning into our first tropical storm? Why aren't the models picking up on that? Are they wrong? What's going on here? So on this particular map, you typically want to see some darker oranges, maybe getting up into like this kind of color of orange, and in order to be able to see that this thing has enough warm water underneath it to sustain itself. And you can see there's a little area there closer to the coast, so initially this thing will have some juicier water to work with, but as it moves up to the north and east, and it's going to be a fast moving system too, so it's not going to be sitting over these waters for very long, and yeah, so it's just not going to have a lot of fuel to fuel it from the warm waters of the ocean, which is necessary for sustained tropical growth into more of a dangerous storm in terms of like tropical storm, tropical depression, or hurricane. So it's a faster moving system, doesn't stay over the ocean for that long. The shear environment initially is a little bit unfavorable, so it's lack of time and it's a lack of warmth in the oceans that's really going to keep this storm pretty tame. And most likely, at least at this point, again, the models can change as we get a little bit further in the future, but at least at this point, it's not looking very likely that this thing's even going to become a tropical storm in the first place. Here are our first spaghetti models of the year, and you can see that there is quite a wide range here. Initially, where this center of low pressure goes, it's kind of what we see a lot in terms of a storm that hasn't formed yet. But you can see for the most part, this storm is going to track very briefly into that warm water and then kind of skedaddle off to the north and east. I mean, we're talking only 3 or 4 days from now, this thing's already way out into those cooler waters, so it just really doesn't have a lot of time. Also, here is the spaghetti model plots from the GEFS, and you can see it's kind of the same thing. Brings it over those little bit warmer waters for a little bit, and then it kind of skedaddles out of here pretty quickly. So again, by the time it goes over Florida, it's not going to be a threat. So listen to those people online that are screaming about this storm saying, oh, this is going to be a big problem. It's not going to be a big problem. Main threat is going to come with it is flooding. Flooding could be potentially a decent issue, which we're about to talk about here in a moment. But yeah, I mean, definitely not a scary storm in terms of tropical activity. In terms of what all the models are saying in terms of intensity, right now you can see that none of these things bring it to a tropical storm strength until it gets way out over the ocean. And at this point, again, it's going to be bringing in a lot of that drier air on the backside. It'll most likely be more of a colder core, low pressure system. So at this point where it's reaching, tropical storm intensity, it is most likely going to be a hybrid or a subtropical low. So it's not going to necessarily be designated as a tropical storm at that point. But yeah, I mean, that's what we're talking about there. So let's go ahead and talk about the flooding in Florida and what you guys can expect with this storm. All right, looking at the precipitation out here for Florida, you can see that we're going to get rounds of storms. Up here is the time and the date there, so keep your eye on that. But on the 11th today, going in throughout the night, this thing jumps a decent amount of rain today, and then going into the next day, still a lot of rain in Florida, and then into the 13th, even more rain in Florida as this thing continues to kind of track across Florida. And so a couple of days here where we could see some elevated rainfall amounts. This is the NAM 12Ks solution here. So, we're going to look at a couple models just to get a little bit of a better understanding. But look at this across the state of Florida. I mean, these colors colors are not good. These colors are not good. These are not the colors you want to see in the reds area. I mean, we're talking widespread, 5 inches of rain possible. Over here near Cape Coral could have over 15 inches of rain, and that's just from today into the 14th. Over there near Cedar Key could also have almost a foot of rain, so some flooding concerns are definitely going to be a problem here across the state of Florida. Now, looking at the GFS's solution here, you can see it's a little bit more conservative out here, but you see the main area where flooding could be an issue is going to be over at near Cape Coral. So there is a little bit of agreement there. Anywhere from 7, 6, 5 to 9, almost 10 inches of rain is going to be possible down over here near Cape Coral. So it looks like that is kind of a bullseye area, at least of the agreement between the NAM and the GFS. Let's go look at the HRRR for the next 2 days and see how that lines up initially. And this is through the 13th, and look at this. It looks like there is overall some decent agreement of the biggest flood threat being down here in the southern portion of Florida. I mean, we've been talking over here near Tampa, a couple of inches to maybe even getting up to 5, 6, 7 inches there along kind of the Bay region, and then coming down a little bit further to the south near Cape Coral, Fort Lauderdale. Then we got a large area here of 7 to 10, maybe even some spots of over a foot of rain. Also over there, look at that near Fort Lauderdale and the Miami area could potentially see anywhere from 5 inches to, in some extreme cases, a foot of rain. So again, guys, please be weather aware for that flood threat. It is going to be an issue. All right, now talking about the severe weather and what we can expect over the next couple of days. We got a slight risk out here in the northern plains going into a little bit of the Great Lakes here. It's going to mainly be for Minnesota, parts of Wisconsin, Iowa, little parts there of Nebraska, South and North Dakota. One of the threats that we're going to be dealing with here is a tornado threat. As you can see, we've got a 5% for tornadoes. That means a 5% chance of seeing a tornado within a 25-mile radius of you. And that's going to be for areas like Grand Rapids, Bemidji, St. Cloud, Brooklyn Park, Bloomington, Rochester, also over there near Sioux Falls, some areas north Iowa there, and then over there near Eau Claire in Wisconsin. We also got a 2% risk around that as well. So definitely a day that you got to be weather aware for tornadoes, especially in this brown region. Again, a couple tornadoes could be possible in there. Our wind risk is a 15% chance here for 60-mile-per-hour winds there in the yellow, and then in the brown, it's a 5% chance for that. And the hail risk could see some significant hail out there, especially in this brown or this black outlined region here with these little dashed lines in between it. For areas like International Falls, Grand Rapids, St. Cloud, Brooklyn Park, Bloomington, Sioux Falls, Watertowns, Brookings, and then around that we got a yellow without that black outline. That's going to be a 15% chance for quarter-sized hail again, and here is a 15% chance for 2-inch hail and above, and then in this brown is a 5% chance for that quarter-sized hail. So overall, definitely a day where you guys got to be weather aware. Let's kind of go over the latest timing here next. All right, so going into tonight in the early morning hours, see not a whole lot happens. Maybe some rain starts to form going into tomorrow morning. That's going to come through like St. Cloud, Brooklyn, Bloomington there initially, and then by the time we get more into the evening hours, you can see that this kind of rain showers turn into something that could be a little bit more severe there. By the time we get into 1, 2 p.m., that pushes down into Rochester, La Crosse by 4 p.m. And then look at this, right around the time we get into about 6 p.m. here, we have some widespread supercells starting to form here in northern Minnesota. And the thing about these storms is that we could be dealing, with some decent shear out in the area. I mean, we're talking, anywhere from 20 to 30, maybe even some isolated spots of 40 knots in the lower level of the atmosphere, going up a little bit higher. I mean, you got plenty of shear up there in the upper levels of the atmosphere as well. And then coming down even further to the surface, we got a lot of instability out there with those storms as well. So there's definitely a decent tornado threat out here, especially along with these storms that could form on this little area where we have all those kind of things coming together here from like Ellie down into Brooklyn Park. And then maybe some of these storms could extend, as far south as northern Iowa. I mean, look at that. You get some damaging winds and potential for some hail, maybe a brief tornado work its way into northeastern Iowa there. So definitely be weather aware anywhere from, by the time we start to see these more isolated storms fire, about 1 p.m. there around Bloomington and Brooklyn Park and Rochester, and then that pushes down to the south and east. And then when these new storms fire around 6 p.m., we'll be live to cover this on this channel. So we'll be breaking it down on radar if you need it with storm chasers, if they're up there, or webcams or traffic cams as the day continues. Going into day 3 here, which we're going to have to use the NAM 3K model, hopefully to get a little sneak peek here. You can see that we do have a little bit of a larger area of a risk, but kind of more on the muted end for right now, but things could change as we get closer. But yeah, you can see anywhere from like Wyoming, Colorado, going into Kansas, Nebraska, Missouri, Iowa, Illinois, Wisconsin, parts of Indiana, and Michigan could see a severe weather risk. I mean, look at that. Definitely going to have some issues in potential for some severe weather. Maybe you can't rule out a couple tornadoes as well. But pushing this through, you can see those storms fire going into the 12th, and then as we go into the overnight hours, they kind of dissipate. And then let's see if we can get any. Yeah, okay. So it looks like we're going to have a boundary form in and along this area. So that's why we're going to be able to see widespread severe weather with the main area going to be here. So let's kind of look at, and it looks like it's going to fire sometime at around, 6, 7 p.m. Maybe, I would give like a 4-hour time frame in between there. So anywhere between like 3 and like 8 p.m. There's just technically 5 hours, but you get the point. Timing is not definite at this moment. Not a whole lot of shear here initially with these storms. Not really seeing, too much shear in the area. Maybe a little bit more up there in Michigan, but that's not necessarily, the kind of direction of the shear that you would really be looking for in order to, have some tornado risk. Definitely have some upper level shear there. So a little bit of spin in the atmosphere, maybe a smaller chance for a tornado. Looking at the surface-based cape, though, I mean, look at that. The atmosphere is juiced up here. I mean, there's a lot of fuel for these storms. This is not everything, but it does seem like there might be enough forcing to maybe support some severe weather, even with the shear values being a little bit on the lower end. Could definitely see, maybe some larger hail and some damaging winds as this little boundary, fires off some cells in this area, especially over there near Kansas City, Springfield, and Bloomington right now. But again, some of these things could change as we get closer. Models will change. This is 3 days out, so just keep that in mind. But yeah, all right. That's going to be it for me. Thank you for tuning in. I really do appreciate it. Again, don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button, and I'll see you guys on the next one.